Minister, the main provisions of this bill is the creation of the Agricultural Appeals Review Panel, independent from the Agricultural Appeals Office, and that is to be welcomed. And as you said, it is part of your programme for government, and it is envisaged that this office would be responsible for undertaking independent review of the decisions of appeals officers of the AAO. It also further seeks to facilitate decision reviews in an accessible manner, leaving the option open for High Court appeals on scheme decisions. I just wonder, Minister, in an answer, do you know how many farmers have actually ever taken High Court appeals on that basis? I wouldn't have thought it was too many. In this bill, there are clarifications introduced around time frames for seeking review of an appeal decision by the AAO. It says that inspections for eligibility and cross-compliance are carried out by the lead department, and where an appellant, that being a person lodging an appeal, is dissatisfied with the department decision on a scheme application, the situation is to submit an appeal to the Agricultural Appeals Office for a decision review within 3 months of having been notified of the department decision and having exhausted the internal department review processes. The legislation proposes to set up this new review panel where farmers are dissatisfied with the decision of the AOO, and I welcome that, and I think most people do, and I'm glad to see, Minister, that you did have wide engagement with farm bodies informing the background to this legislation. As part of the review panel, it will consist of 5 members, an independent chairperson, the Director of Agricultural Appeals Office, and 3 additional members with technical and practical expertise. And I think, Minister, that's probably the foremost important part of this panel that you're proposing. And I'd just be interested to know, in terms of what the department thinks technical and practical experience would be. And I would say to you, it needs to be people, obviously, who are farming, with probably a number of different farming backgrounds, but people who understand the importance of engaging in agricultural schemes and actually trying to draw down money as part of their income and getting it. The other recommendation is the creation of a Deputy Director for the Appeals Office with a role in quality assurance of appeals processes and consistency of outcomes. That all goes back to basically qualitatively reviewing what this office is doing, and that, I presume, is something that your department is trying to do already, but hopefully engaging this office and mandating it and giving it teeth will improve the situation on the ground. I am happy the bill has gone through the significant pre-legislative scrutiny in terms of making it both robust and improving the environment to review appeal decisions, and to do so with the input of relative farming experience. And hopefully this will ensure maximum engagement on the challenges that often arise in terms of scoring and compliance with all of the requirements of farm schemes. And that is one of the big issues that arise, as you know, with farmers where they are availing of farm schemes, is actually in terms of their scoring and their compliance, and actually being able to be awarded the full output that the schemes provide. Could I just go out slightly, that's beyond the legislation for a minute, just to digress slightly. And in terms of the calendar year 22, Irish farmers received around 2.02 billion in direct farm payments. And the largest payment was the Basic Farm Payment, or BPS, which accounted for around 810 million euro. But Minister, you'll be aware in the most recent census, 61,473 people considered themselves to be farmers in Ireland. Yet, according to the BPS payments last year, there were 123,000 people registered for those. And I would say to you, and you know this issue has arisen a number of times, the Irish proportion of the CAP budget is diminishing. And we need to modernise the whole area of CAP. And it needs to be thought about in terms of awarding productive farmers who are actually producing food in an ever more tightly and regulated business and environment. And you know, at the end of the day, we talk a lot about exports here, I should say, and about productive farming. But you know, this is where we now have an issue in this country, and we can see it at the moment in terms of, if you go around the country at the moment and look at what's happening in terms of productive farming, you know, with the weather the way it's been, with the grass growing, with the nitrogen derogation, you know, the reductions in yield that are occurring across the country, particularly in the dairy sector, and that will have a knock-on effect right across beef and stores, and I would assume something similar is happening potentially in the sheep sector as well. The increasing environmental pressures to food production are bringing significant change to our food agri sector, and the CAP monies must be prioritised, Minister, for those 61,473 active food producers in order to support them in meeting their ongoing challenges. Without significant revisiting of farm supports distribution, significant numbers of viable farms may no longer make productive sense into the future. And that is actually stark and is staring us in the face. And I know of a number of farmers who are in that position presently. And I would also highlight to you again, Minister, the ongoing challenges that reducing nitrogen levels is bringing. And farmers are as committed as anybody else to biodiversity. And I would say to you, in my own area, down in the southeast, we get singled out a lot for the high nitrogen levels in the 3 rivers that we have down there. And it's all attributed to farming. And I can tell you that is most unfair. Most unfair, because we still have some dysfunctional water effluent and treatment systems down there. We still have some factories who are leaving effluent off into the water courses. So it's not all down to agriculture, but agriculture gets the blame. But as you'll be well aware, Minister, for this past year, particularly for farmers who are trying to put out fertiliser, the amount of P&K they can put out now has been significantly reduced. And that is having a direct effect to the amount of grass that they're growing, which is having an effect to their yield. And farmers are now being told either take on more land to try and keep your stocking rates or reduce your stocking. And yet we are one of the most efficient grass and milk producing nations in the world. And it makes it hard sense, Minister. So, and I know these are EU directives and we're signed up to them, and there's not a lot we can do, but certainly in terms of the implementation of plans, we must have some latitude to understand the difficulties that farmers are receiving in that area. And the second point I'd make to you, Minister, is I know of a dairy farmer in the southeast who had a farm inspection in January of this year, where 3 agricultural inspectors came to his farm and spent 3 days going around looking at his infrastructure, taking soil sampling, all of that, reviewing his paperwork. And lo and behold, in June, another 2 arrived to do the same inspection yet again, less than 6 months later, and review what the first people were doing. Now, all of this is taking up a person's productive time, and more importantly, it's starting to make people feel like that they're somehow villains in terms of the role that they're playing. And I think surely if we have inspections, we should be able to do them once a year and do them adequately, or do them in terms of the significant seasonality that the schemes require. But it doesn't make much sense to me, Minister, to have 5 people traipsing around the south of Ireland for 5 days each. I'm not quite sure what they were doing. The other point I want to make to you, Minister, is something that is in relation just to other payments that might be picked. And someone has just said to me about the drive for improved biodiversity should be encouraged by a coupled payment that farmers could see as a valuable entity within itself. Many farmers have devoted their lives to being good land managers and producing best quality milk, grain and meat that the market demands, and is of a quality that is very acceptable, and having some kind of a biodiversity payment would encourage them further in that area. And finally, Minister, can I just share with you just another communication that came to me while I'm coming in here, and it's just on the area of agriculture. And this was in relation to farmers who are suffering TB testing at the moment, and how they get in touch with the department when they are in that position. And this person texted me and said, the department mostly don't answer their phones. If they do, they offer no help. Beg your pardon. Will they get someone to the phone? Will they get someone to phone you if you're lucky? They say they get someone to phone you, but if you're lucky, you'll get a call back usually within 2 weeks, or else usually an answering machine. Rarely do you get a call back. Some person needs to be on people who are on short-time, term leave, annual leave, parental leave, or sick, and there's no one else seems to be available to help or to take over the query that they're handling. And what they say is, can there be a line number introduced that can be answered in respect of TB testing for every county in the country, so that farmers can have some liaison within the department to know how things are working out within what is a very distressing time for many farmers when they get a positive test on their farm. So, Minister, maybe you take that on board. But in the main, in terms of the legislation that's being proposed, as I say, it's had significant pre-leg, and I think it's to be welcomed by the House. I'd certainly welcome it.